Hello again. Hello again. This is Tony Wright, First Love Christian Church, or FLCC, and A.B. Wright Ministries. This is the 90-day Bible study. We're still at it. Day 32. We're in 2 Chronicles 7, chapter 11th verse through the 23rd chapter and the 15th verse. Now, remember the Chronicler, he had recounted how Solomon had built the temple. And then Solomon went on to establish cities for the people and fortify those cities with walls and fences and gates and bars. Man, the way they were constantly under attack, I guess they need walls and gates and stuff. And so we know that people have been putting bars on windows and doors and things for a long time, huh? Boy. And Solomon, he generated powerful armies to help protect the people and the cities and their possessions. So in the city, they put in place, he strategically placed chariots and horses and horsemen all across the territories. And for all the people that lived in those territories, except for the people of Israel, they had to pay a tribute, money, a little tax basically, to the king and to Israel. And many of them also worked as servants. But again, the children of Israel, they didn't have to pay any tribute or anything. Then Solomon, he brought the daughter of Pharaoh up from Jerusalem to Milo, to this palace that he had built there. He had married the daughter of Pharaoh, remember? And then, because he said that, the holy places and the ark were in Jerusalem, but why is she his wife in the first place if the place he should reside in is too holy for her? I'm not understanding that kind of thinking. She defiles the house of David, but not you. Okay. Anyway, Solomon appointed all those who were to perform different services in the temple, the priests and the porters and the Levites, and where their assigned duties were. And then after this is when Solomon, he received ships from Hiram. And a little while after that, he had the visit from the Queen of Sheba. Now, what was recorded was that the Queen of Sheba brought all kinds of spices and camels and gold and valuable stones. And she came to find out if what she was hearing about this Solomon dude was really for real, They were saying, how rich and wise and handsome he was. So she had a few questions for him, and she sat down with him and put him to the test. And as she questioned him, she watched. And she saw all the things that had been prepared for the different kinds of food and how many servants he had and how happy these servants seemed to be and the fine apparel that everybody was wearing and how King Bling moved around. And boy, she was so, as a matter of fact, remember, she said that she had not even believed all the stuff that she was hearing about him. But now that she was seeing it for herself, that the truth was that she had only heard part of how great this dude was. That he was even more fascinating than he was told to have been. and had more wisdom and more wealth than was being said of him. She said that King Solomon exceeded anything that had been told to her about him. She said, she told him that, blessed be his God, the God that thought enough of him to place him on the throne, and the God that had loved Israel so much that he gave Solomon to be a king and to rule over these people. And then she gave King Solomon 120 talents of gold. Remember, that's about 5 tons of gold. And then a huge quantity of precious stones and more spices than you can even imagine. And Brother Solomon was not to be outdone. So he gave Queen of Sheba pretty much anything that she desired. And then she returned, back to her land. Now, around this time, Solomon was receiving about 25 tons of gold every year, right? Not even including the gold that came from merchants and traders. And it didn't include the gold that came from other kings around, from the kings of Arabia and the other kings around the nations around Israel. And with some of what Solomon was taking in, he made 200 shields and breastplates of gold that weighed about 7.5 pounds each. And he made about 300 shields and breastplates that weighed about 4 pounds each. And then King Solomon had this huge ivory throne made that was overlaid with gold. He had these huge armrests made, and he put a statue of a lion at the side of each armrest. And then he put 12 lion statues down the steps, one on each side of each of the 6 steps leading up to the throne. Now, the Bible says that there was no throne like this anywhere. Boy, you think, what in the world? And all the drinking vessels were made of gold, as were all the household things here and at his palace in the forests of Lebanon. And then every 3 years, his ships went to Tarshish and returned loaded with gold and silver, ivory, peacock. Solomon loved these exotic things, boy. And then he continued to increase in wealth and in wisdom, though. And everybody who was anybody sought to be in the presence of old King Solomon. Boy, they just wanted to hear what this dude had to say. You know, he was the E.F. Hutton before there was even an E.F. Hutton. You hear me? And anybody that came, they brought gifts. You know, everybody wanted to impress King Bling. Boy, he just kept getting richer and richer. Can you imagine? He accumulated so much wealth and so many assets. The Bible tells us that silver during this time for Judah was as plentiful as stones there in Jerusalem. And that's how things went for this king for like 40 years. And then he died and he was replaced by his son Rehoboam. And remember, Rehoboam went to Shechem, where all the people of Israel had gathered to officially make him king. And remember, you know, when Solomon had drifted from God's ways, God had sent Ahijah, the prophet, to tell Jeroboam that he was going to make Jeroboam king over 10 of the tribes. And although God told Solomon that he wouldn't do anything until after his death, Solomon still wanted to kill Jeroboam. So Jeroboam had gone and hidden out in Egypt. But then when Jeroboam heard about Solomon's death, he returned. So there he was there in Shechem for the coronation event. And the people of the north, the ones in Israel, they had been being mistreated by King Solomon. So they came to King Rehoboam seeking some relief. And right away, we saw that the wisdom of Solomon didn't rub off on this dude, not even a little bit. Why would I say that? Well, you saw what he did, right? He started out right, though, because he didn't respond right away. He told him, come back in 3 days. Then he went to the elders, you know, the old guys. And he asked them what they thought he should do. And they told this dude, okay, now, if you show them kindness, then they will be on your side forever. And I'm sure that Rehoboam, I'm sure that he thought, yeah, you know, that's a good idea. But he probably was a little shaky about it. You know, have you ever run into this kind of leader? Can't make up their mind? Boy, don't even get me started on that one. So anyway, he needs a little confirmation. So he goes to this younger crew, his homeboy, you know, the ones he had grown up with. And he asked them. So they say, man, you should let them know who's in charge. Tell them you're really going to let them know what having it hard means. Tell them that they haven't seen anything yet. If they thought that King Solomon was hard, and they thought that things were hard before, wait until they see how tough you're going to be. Now, you know that this tough guy, large and in charge kind of image, has some appeal, right? You know, it feeds the ego. Well, so much for the old saying, you can catch more flies with honey than you can with vinegar. Anyway, Rehoboam, he told them when they returned what the young dudes had told him, that he was going to be even tougher on them. So, of course, it led to the split, 2 kingdoms, with Jeroboam in the north over Israel and Rehoboam in the south over Judah, just like God said it was going to be. And for about 3 years, though, Rehoboam and the people of Judah, they walked according to the ways of the Lord. But Rehoboam was gradually drifting into his own counsel, you know, feeding on his own hype and taking on wives from everywhere and concubines. And he had like 18 wives and about 60 concubines. He had 28 sons, 60 daughters. And one of his wives was the daughter of Absalom. You remember him. That was the daughter Tamar, or they also call her Maacah. But anyway, when he thought he had it under control, he forsook the ways of the Lord. You know, like when you get to the point where you say, I got this, and you stop doing the same things that you did that allowed you to get there in the first place. Are you kidding me? you prayed and you moaned and you whined and you sought the Lord. Then he came through. And now you're thinking, look what I did, boy. Now, ain't that about time when things are really getting ready to go bad? Yeah, well, here came King Shishak from Egypt and took pretty much everything of value that Judah had. They looted the temple, took all the gold, everything. And Rehoboam, he had to make shields of brass. Shields out of brass? From gold to brass? Okay, boy, that'll wake you up. So Rehoboam, he humbled himself, and God forgave him, and God changed his mind about destroying him and his people. So things went better for Judah until he died, and his son Abijah took the throne. And Abijah put his trust in God, and because of that, when Jeroboam and Israel came up against Judah, God was with Judah, and they prevailed over Israel. And while Abijah was on the throne, Jeroboam was never able to regain Israel's strong position again. And when Abijah died, his son Asa replaced him. And Asa took down all the high places, got rid of all the groves, got rid of all the places of idol worship. And Asa commanded that the people follow God's ways and obey God's commandment. But Asa, he reinstated the covenant that they had had with Syria to help protect him and protect Judah from Israel. And God was not pleased with the fact that Asa had chose to rely on Syria rather than continue trusting in him. So God, told Asa that he would return him to a time of war after his 35th year of reign and after 10 years of peace. So in his 39th year of reign, Asa developed bad disease in his feet. But again, he wouldn't seek the Lord's help, but relied on his doctors. And 2 years later, Asa died. And did you see that they buried him in a bed that was covered with spices and perfume? And the spices and perfumes that were there were a type of pharmaceutical concoction. Boy, this brother's feet were bad. You hear me? But as you should have noticed, the discussion of the Chronicler about the kings as presented here focused primarily on kings of Judah. Now, that's because as the Chronicler was writing, it was after the return and during, while they were operating there in Jerusalem and trying to get the people reestablished there. So the focus was with them. And he went through the point where Athaliah had taken the throne and killed what she thought to be all the remaining sons, only to find out later that Joash was still alive after they brought him out of hiding at 7 years of age and crowned him king, which led to her death. Oh yeah, they slew Miss, I'm the queen here, and Joash became king at 7. 7 years old? Yeah, it was all right. He had seasoned guidance from Jehoiada the priest, who made sure that the king and the people stayed on track. Speaking of which, I best do the same and make sure that you stay on track. Keep reading this word. Keep checking us out on your favorite social media platform. And please keep making sure to tell your friends, tell your neighbors, FLCC, we're taking ministry back to the first love. Peace.